Alright, guys, welcome back to the Traditional channel. Today we'll be talking about lecture number 20, Totalitarianism and Total War. Totalitarianism, fascism, and communism is an intrinsically modern form of social organization, coupled with Japanese authoritarian militarism. Nations operating under these doctrines conquered much of the developed world and killed untold millions between the 1920s and 1953, the year Stalin died, and of course Mao and others were just getting started. The Second World War is the only truly total war in modern Western history in which all sides violated just war doctrine. Hannah Arendt provided the most famous analysis of totalitarianism and the venality of evil in the Holocaust. Adorno and Horkheimer even more darkly saw fascist barbarians as a self-negating result of the Enlightenment in their dialectic of enlightenment. Led up to the World War II. The years 1933 to 1953, from Hitler's ascension to the chancellorship of Germany to the death of Stalin, were arguably the worst 20 years of the human race has experienced. Fascism ruled in Italy starting in 1922, then in Germany in 1933. Fascist parties and near-fascist parties surged in many countries. Hitler manipulated the Western powers in Russia, remilitarized the Rhineland, and rearmed for war. He signed his non-aggression pact with Stalin in August 1939 and invaded Poland 1 week later, officially beginning the World War II. By the fall of 1941, most of the Western and Central Europe was ruled by Hitler, Mussolini, and their allies or puppet regimes. At the same time, parts of Eastern Europe had been occupied by Stalin. The Japanese Empire, close to fascist itself, conquered China and most of East Asia. In those days, an impartial observer of international politics might well have concluded that liberal republicanism was over. Arendt on totalitarianism. The most famous philosophical analysis of totalitarianism is by political philosopher Hannah Arendt, found in her Origins of Totalitarianism and Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. In Origins of Totalitarianism, Arendt points out that the totalitarianism of Hitler and Stalin was unlike any earlier political regime. Dictatorships and tyranny have always been with us, but totalitarianism is the total organization and mobilization of society in service of the state. Economics, religion, culture, and society all become political. There is no difference among these spheres. The state embodies and rules all. Totalitarianism requires that the majority of the citizens be previously atomized, that is, not involved in political parties or active in politics. The totalitarian state aims to embody a direct relation to each citizen that transcends any other relations. The citizens may have to family, locate, church, profession, or party. In totalitarianism, life must be turned upside down, which means that nothing can be assumed truth, including all empirical truth or concepts of the facts, is completely relativized to the needs of the party or state. Nothing is too ridiculous or far-fetched to be believed, including confessions coerced under torture. Totalitarian movements and states inherently insist that their goal is to conquer and remake the world, not merely their own states. As Arendt notes, they conduct foreign policy as if every foreign state is a potential territory, and their use of power is deeply non-utilitarian. Short-run consequences, once power is secured, do not matter. The long-term ideal goals are whatever. Further, Arendt claims that places of complete terror such as the Nazi extermination camps and the Soviet labor camps are necessary. And the point is not so much to kill human beings, but to establish a form of non-existence in which humans are no longer treated or seen as humans at all. In effect, Nazism and Stalinism sought to render everything human transparent to the forces of nature or history, which simply blow through humanity in a complete and continual process of change, rushing toward the ideal. The essence of government became motion. Law, ethics, all forms of tradition, and the integrity of the human body are no longer limitations on the motion. Arendt later, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil, was controversial. She was attacked for calling Eichmann's evil banal, as if that were an apology or a minimization of the Holocaust. But her point was that Eichmann could not see beyond his role. He was guilty of the most profound of crimes, but had no profanity in himself. Targeting civilians. World War II was a total war in a new sense, because masses of civilians were intentionally killed by all sides. Although they were undoubtedly atrocities in the First World War, the massive death tolls of major battles in that war were generated by the fact that military tactics had not caught up with the new technology. Generals could think of nothing better than sending ever larger numbers of foot soldiers over the top of the trenches, only to see machine guns cut most of them down. This continued for 4 years of relative stalemate. Between the wars, military thinkers, partly on moral grounds, decided that such a war could not be fought again. War needed to regain its mobility and ability to be decisive. This idea is compatible with just war theory. If war is to be morally acceptable, when necessary, wars must end. Continual indecisive combat kills soldiers for no reason. An act of war that does not hasten the end of the war is, in effect, immoral. And from a military point of view, the aim is not to inflict maximum casualties but to win decisive engagements. Thus, theorists between the wars put their trust in the new inventions of the tank and the airplane and hoped that the next war would be more decisive and shorter. But interwar theories also promoted something else. Giulio Donet, an Italian, ominously predicted that the next war would involve aerial bombing of civilians because civilians participate in the industry of war, producing armaments. Despite Donet, the interwar military conventions continued to hold, prohibiting the targeting of civilians, but early in the Second World War a German plane bombed London by mistake. In retaliation, the British bombed residential areas of Berlin 5 times in 14 nights. The Germans bombed London in a retaliation. This broke the dam. The international norm collapsed. All sides with the technical capacity engaged in international mass bombing of civilians. Philosophers in the war. In England and the United States, some philosophers such as W.V.O. Quinn and Alan Turing joined the war effort. The most famous French philosophers, Jean-Paul Sartre, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, Albert Camus, and Simon de Beauvoir, were all active in one way or another in the French resistance. Many European philosophers, especially Jews or left-wing thinkers, emigrated from Germany and other lands to England and the United States. The Frankfurt School thinkers on the left, the neoliberal Vienna School, and Hannah Arendt all came to England or America. These emigres and many others worked a major change in American philosophy, in particular, seeding American academy with first-rate European thinkers. Some took another path. Giovanni Gentile became Mussolini's official philosopher, and Martin Heidegger, the most important German philosopher of the 20th century, joined the Nazi Party. As rector of Freiburg University and made a number of pro-Hitler speeches after the war, he never recanted. A fundamental question: how could the most advanced civilization with the most humane values, scientific thought, and liberal republican politics have thrown it all away for the most brutal, primitive political movements and self-destruction? One of the most interesting but extreme responses came from two of the Frankfurt School thinkers, Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer. As exiles in California, Adorno and Horkheimer composed their Radical Dialectic of Enlightenment, a deeply pessimistic answer to the fundamental question. They argue that since the time of Homer, the differentiation of the aristocratic ego from its body, women, slaves, and the rest of nature had been the way of enlightenment, that is, progress, whatever good it brought, came at a price. The necessary separation of the rational self from all other aspects of the person. And they argue that the social elites identified socially oppressed or marginal groups with those repressed aspects of their selves. But modern scientific rationality since the 18th century had performed a critique of this ego or self, emptying it into concrete values, sentimental comments, and religious metaphysics, leaving only a supremely powerful, instrumentally rational center, whose sense of self flourished in separating from all others. In short, we are left with an ego that can do anything but believes in nothing. The ultimate freedom and mastery of this ego is to treat other humans as materials for its end. The unhappy conclusion of Adorno and Horkheimer is that the enlightened self, in achieving freedom from tradition and power over nature, in shedding the trappings of religion, inevitably becomes the fascist self, capable of any act of subjugation of others. The implication is that social freedom is dependent on enlightened thought, but enlightenment must eventually destroy itself. The argument was an extreme version of a recurring theme among theories of the modern age, the idea that liberal capitalist republicanism is based on a set of principles, attitudes, or institutions that this system itself undermines as it progresses. Economic historian Jerry C. Mueller had called this the eroding foundation thesis. The post-war world. The war and its resolution created a new world for the second half of the 20th century and hence for political theory. The period from 1922 to 1945 created our familiar 20th century spectrum of international politics, with communism on the far left, liberal republicanism in the middle, and fascism on the far right. Know that each position tends to see the continuum in a different way. Fascism saw liberalism as a weak-kneed fall guy for communism. The left saw fascism as an intensification of liberal capitalism. Liberals saw fascism and communism as equally distant from the free society. But fascism was destroyed as a political movement, rarely to arise again. European world power was severely truncated, leaving the United States and the Soviet Union as the winners. In 1949, the Soviet acquired the atom bomb, and the Chinese Communist Party, headed by a Stalinist figure, Mao Zedong, won its revolution. Communism ruled from the Elbe in Germany across Eurasia to the Pacific, dominated by two criminal totalitarian personalities with nuclear arms. The Cold War between the US-led West and the Soviet-led East would last for 44 years. There are many lessons to take from the years 1933 to 1953, but one is simple. No matter how difficult our problems seem today, no matter how much brutality and suffering we see in the world, things have been much worse. We may disagree about the nature of the good, but we already know what evil looks like all too well. Alright guys, I really hope you liked this new lecture, and let me guys know what you think about it, what you thought about it, and hope you really liked it.